It is 7 o'clock. Good to have you with us this morning. It is a controversial policy that so far is struggling to get off the ground after several legal challenges. But today, a flight taking the first asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda is currently still due to take off. But there are reports this morning that as few as 7 people could be on that plane. So at what cost? And will further legal challenges today reduce the number of ticket holders further still? Plus, the UK on a fresh collision course with the EU over planned changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Lots then to talk about with the Foreign Secretary, who will be sitting here shortly. I'll also be joined by Ireland's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Thomas Byrne, as his government calls the move a new low. It is Tuesday, the 14th of June. An immoral policy that shames Britain. The Church of England condemns the Rwanda deportations, with the first flight of asylum seekers set to leave the UK today. Two sides to every story. We report from Rwanda on the accommodation awaiting the deported and meet asylum seekers in another camp who say they're desperate to leave.
Did you think about staying in Rwanda?
I never, and I will not do that. And it would be a last mistake to do so.
Significant concern or no big deal? The war of words over planned changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol that could turn into legal action. Seeking justice. 5 years on from the Grenfell tragedy. The survivors say the wounds haven't yet healed.
We are broken. We have holes everywhere. And it's not easy what we went through, what we lived, what we continue to go through.
The tip of the iceberg. Now, 1,000 people every day waited over 12 hours in A&E last year. We'll be drilling down into the figures. Amber Heard gives her first interview since losing her libel trial against Johnny Depp, saying that she doesn't blame the jury.
I actually understand he's a beloved character, and people feel they know him. He's a fantastic actor.
A first look at the Queen since her Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Also ahead on the programme, no satisfaction for Rolling Stones fans, as Mick Jagger is forced to cancel a gig in Amsterdam after testing positive for COVID. And the Falklands remembered. As Britain marks the 40th anniversary, we'll be speaking to a veteran about his memories of the conflict. Morning all. An immoral policy that shames Britain. Condemnation this morning from the Church of England on the government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Now, the first flight is due to take off later today after a last-ditch legal bid to halt deportations failed. But there are reports this morning there may be as few as 7 people on board the plane. Very pleased to say then that we're joined now by the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. Minister, lovely to have you in the studio this morning.
Good morning.
Let us start then with Rwanda. As things stand at the moment, and of course there was a significant legal victory at the High Court and the Court of Appeal yesterday for the government. How many people are we expecting to send to Rwanda later today?
Well, we are expecting to send the flight later today. I can't say exactly how many people will be on the flight, but the really important thing is that we establish the principle and we start to break the model, the business model of these appalling people traffickers who are trading in misery. That is why we're doing this policy, and that's why it's important that we get the flight out today.
You might not be able to put a specific number on it, but it is pretty clear that the number who will be on that flight, if anyone is on that flight, will be significantly less than you had intended. That's fair to say, isn't it?
The important thing is that we get the flight out, we establish the principle, and we start demonstrating to people that this business model of trafficking people into the United Kingdom, risking their lives in the English Channel, simply doesn't work. And it's important we get the flight out. We don't know exactly how many people will be on that flight, but they will go on future flights.
And I understand completely your desire to avoid putting a figure on when things may well be fluid throughout the day. But is it possible that this plane will take off with no one on it?
There will be people on the flight, and if they're not on this flight, they will be on the next flight, because we are determined to break the model of the appalling people traffickers and sort this issue out, which has caused untold misery, including people dying in the English Channel.
Completely, and there will be people watching this that understand that, but there will also be people who are concerned about the costs of sending people to Rwanda. Can we put a figure on how much today's flight will be costing?
I can't put a figure on that, but what we have to look at is the cost of illegal immigration, the cost to the United Kingdom, the cost to the individuals and their families who are suffering from the actions of these people traffickers. That's the issue that we are seeking to deal with by putting in place this route to Rwanda. And it's very important we get that route going. We show that people trafficking doesn't work, and we're able to reduce the costs over time of illegal immigration into the United Kingdom.
Completely get that point, but there are reports this morning that suggest because of the legal action in which you weren't successful at both at the High Court, there could be as few as 7 people on that flight today. Is that accurate?
Well, as I say, I don't have a figure. The important point is the principle. That we are establishing the route
the cost and the practicalities are also important, Foreign Secretary.
Going to Rwanda. If they're not on this flight, they will be on the next flight. We want to break the model of the people traffickers.
Yeah, you've said that.
We want to stop these costs, both in monetary costs, but also in human misery that these illegal immigration routes are causing.
So you think it's value for money, no matter what it costs?
It is value for money.
What is the legal situation then of people who are refused asylum in this country, popped on a plane, sent to Rwanda and granted asylum there? Would they be able to re-enter the United Kingdom?
They will be permanently located in Rwanda, and that is the agreement that we have with the Rwandan government. I think it's important to note that this is an agreement with Rwanda, also about helping Rwanda develop their economy, helping people live locally in Rwanda.
Sure, but if they're successful in their asylum claim in Rwanda, it does suggest that we might have got it wrong at this end.
Look, the important thing is that we are establishing the principle that people are being relocated to Rwanda and settled in Rwanda.
Other people would say that it is equally as important that as a forward-thinking nation, we act with moral integrity in all of this. I just want to, you'll have seen the comments of the Church of England, but for viewers who have not, I just need to show them this. The Church of England has written a letter to say that this in essence shames Britain. Could we bring that up, please, Alan? I think we should have it for the screen. Yeah. Whether or not the first deportation flight leaves Britain today for Rwanda, this policy should shame us as a nation. This is the Church of England saying this. It continues. I hope. Yeah, the shame is our own, because our Christian heritage should inspire us to treat asylum seekers with compassion, fairness and justice as we have for centuries. This immoral policy shames Britain. Again, the Church of England, which as far as I'm aware is not some den of neo-Marxism, is accusing this government of immorality.
I don't agree with that. The people who are immoral in this case are the people traffickers trading on human misery. And that is
no one is denying that the people traffickers are immoral. They're just simply saying that this is not the solution to the problem.
Those people, Neil, need to suggest an alternative policy that will work to deal with these illegal people traffickers.
So explain the logic of that to me, that someone else has to come up with a better idea than yours for your idea to be ruled out as immoral.
What I'm saying is our policy is completely legal. It's completely moral. We are housing people in a safe country in Rwanda. And what I'm saying to the critics of the policy who don't have an alternative about how we deal with this illegal migration is they don't have an alternative. They're criticising our policy, which is effective and does work.
When a significant majority of those passing over the channel are successful in their asylum claims, what on earth is the rationale for this?
The rationale is that we have a migration partnership with Rwanda. It's about helping develop Rwanda. It's about stopping these illegal routes and people acting in a way that endangers human life. That is the logic of the policy.
Let's turn our attention to Northern Ireland and, of course, the protocol. Big discussion ongoing. You were hitting the phone yesterday morning, Sefcovic, and, of course, across the Irish Sea as well. Just explain, if you can, in simple terms to our viewers, exactly what is wrong with the Northern Ireland protocol that your government negotiated, signed, ratified.
What has happened is the Northern Ireland Protocol and the impact of it has undermined the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing people in Northern Ireland not able to access the same goods as people in Great Britain. We're seeing customs costs of trading goods across the Irish Sea. We're seeing people not able to benefit from the same tax breaks as people in GB. So when the Chancellor at the Spring Statement gave a VAT cut on solar panels, that wasn't available in Northern Ireland. So people in Northern Ireland, particularly in the unionist community, are feeling that they are less connected to Great Britain and that they are not benefiting from being part of the United Kingdom. And that is a problem that we need to deal with. It has been going on now for 18 months. We've had 18 months of negotiations. We haven't got anywhere. The EU have said that they're unwilling to change the protocol. Therefore, we have to act to make sure we restore the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
This is all why, in the kind of the legal paper that you published yesterday, you set out your use of the doctrine of necessity to justify, in essence, going back on your international agreement with the European Union. Just explain exactly where the grave and immediate peril that you are required to demonstrate to use the doctrine, where that grave and immediate peril exists. To my mind, I'm not sure that, having to fill in forms to send sausages to Belfast counts as grave and immediate peril.
I think we all remember how hard-won peace and political stability was in Northern Ireland, and the importance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in establishing both the successful North-South relationships, North-South trade and North-South communities, but also the East-West relationships.
Sure. I suggest that there are people who know a lot more about the Troubles than you and I, and they would, if they could, be sitting in Stormont at the moment. A majority of MLAs disagree with the action that you're taking. They don't see grave and immediate peril in front of them. I'm not sure invoking the Troubles right now is helping your argument.
What the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is based on is the principle of parity of esteem of both communities in Northern Ireland. And you did mention the MLAs, but those weren't MLAs from the unionist community. And the point is we need the consent of both communities in Northern Ireland. We need both communities to be treated fairly and equally. And that's what we're doing through our Northern Ireland Protocol legislation. I will be clear, Neil, that we would rather have a negotiated agreement with the EU. And this is what I said to the EU yesterday. What we need is changes to the protocol that are causing real problems in Northern Ireland, raising costs, but also making people feel like they're not part of the...
Why have you not negotiated with the European Union formally since February, then?
I have been in talks with the European Union in February, in March. We've had 18 months of talks
no formal
altogether.
Negotiations. You're not telling me that formal negotiations did take place.
The fundamental point is that the EU won't change the text of the protocol, and it's the text of the protocol that's causing problems. Those are...
Again, completely agree with you.
So it's difficult to negotiate with somebody who won't change the thing that you want to negotiate. That's the issue.
What consequences in Northern Ireland that you are complaining about right now were not predicted before we ratified this?
Well, there have been unintended consequences, and what we've seen over time, Neil, is things gradually getting worse in Northern Ireland.
The impact assessment
and what I cannot allow
said the protocol and the declarations you were going to sign up to would involve the checks that you now complain about, that it would be highly disruptive to the Northern Ireland economy that you're now complaining about. All the problems that you now identify with the Northern Protocol were obvious to people on both sides of the Irish Sea before you signed it. So this grave and immediate peril that you need to have to invoke the doctrine, it's just not there. You were being warned about it 3 years ago.
What we have seen is the situation gradually getting worse. We haven't seen the executive in Northern Ireland established since February. We've seen the trading situation get worse, diversion towards North-South, away from East-West. And this is why we need to act. This is why we cannot allow the situation to drift, and we cannot allow the Belfast Good Friday Agreement to be further undermined.
I
That's why the government's determined to act, and we're doing so in a reasonable way. We're not changing...
the European Union,
we're not
and particularly
changing,
Ireland, would say no to that.
We're not changing the whole protocol, Neil. We're changing the bits
but the idea
that are causing a real...
bad is just it's beyond the pale. I mean, in your command paper of the middle of last year, Lord Frost was talking actively about triggering Article 60. Indeed, let's talk about that. Why are we unilaterally changing our position on the protocol rather than using the mechanism contained within it for precisely moments like this?
Well, the issue with Article 16 and triggering Article 16 is all it would do is put the situation back to what it is now, because we haven't fully implemented the protocol. We've only implemented part of the protocol. We have a standstill arrangement at the moment. And in order to fix the problems which are generating the issues in Northern Ireland, the customs across the Irish Sea, the requirement for customs codes, the tax differences for the people of Northern Ireland from the people of Great Britain, we need to deal with the protocol itself. So Article 16 and triggering it simply wouldn't have delivered the solution we need to fix the problems in Northern Ireland. And this is what I'm saying to the EU. I want to negotiate with the EU, but they have to be willing to change the text of the protocol.
Again, you suggest that things are getting worse, but all of the problems that have been identified right now in Northern Ireland were identified prior to the ratification of the Northern Ireland Protocol. I mean, isn't the simple truth that you all knew it was a bad deal when you signed up to it, but you needed to get Brexit done? You got Brexit done, and you intended, as you are currently doing, wriggling out of it in the way that you are.
We are addressing very, very serious issues in Northern Ireland that have emerged over the past 2 years.
Which bits have emerged? Honestly, tell me at least
they
that.
have caused problems of political instability, as we can see from the fact the executive hasn't formed. They've caused economic and trade problems in Northern Ireland.
Just performing
but
better than the UK economy on average.
The solution we're putting forward doesn't make the EU any worse off. It protects the EU single market at the same time as fixing these problems in Northern Ireland. So we are working on a practical solution that works for everybody. Yes, we want to persuade the EU to negotiate with us to change the protocol to achieve that, but we cannot allow this situation in Northern Ireland to drift. That is where we are now, which is what I'm focused on, having responsibility for the protocol.
I completely understand. And whilst we have you, Minister, and it is away from your brief, and I understand this, but it is the anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire. 72 people lost their lives. This government promised that people would no longer live in unsafe buildings like that. They also promised that people would not have to put their hands in their pockets to rectify the cladding. Neither of those things have happened. And as of this morning, there will be people waking up to this conversation living in unsafe buildings, the likes of Grenfell Tower. What is this government going to do about it?
I mean, I think we all have huge sympathy with the people caught in that appalling tragedy, and it was horrific. I think we all remember how horrific it was. We have been able to rehouse, I think, 98% of people who were living in Grenfell. I think everybody's been offered alternative accommodation. We are supporting those, particularly those who live in buildings of more than 11 stories, to make sure that they 11 metres, sorry, to make sure that they are not having to put their hands in the pockets to pay for cladding. And I know that my colleague, the Housing Secretary, is doing work with the building industry to tackle these very, very serious issues of fire safety, of building regulation. But I think we just all remember how utterly appalling that tragedy was.
We certainly do. Liz Truss, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Let's have a quick look at the papers, starting with the Eye. It leads with a letter from more than 20 bishops condemning the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda as immoral. They also say that it shames the UK. Strong defence, though, of course, from the Foreign Secretary. The Mail, it calls it the court of common sense, presumably referring to the Court of Appeal and the High Court there. Threats from the EU to take legal action over the government's plans to rewrite parts of the Northern Ireland post-Brexit trade protocol on the front of the FT, not entirely surprisingly. And here's the Mirror. It says, that Prince William threatened to pull out of an event, making former PM Tony Blair a Knight of the Garter, if, that is, Prince Andrew was allowed to take part. Well, we have some pictures coming to us, I believe, from Dover, live pictures at the moment, where, of course, as we were hearing from the Foreign Secretary, the desire is to bring to an end the trade of the people smugglers. How many people have lost their lives trying to cross the Channel? Well, the first asylum seekers are expected to be deported to Rwanda later, as we were saying in our interview with Ms Truss. The country is already a destination for other asylum seekers. From the capital, Kigali, Shingi Marariki has this report.
Rwanda is ready. 50 rooms are waiting for the first asylum seekers to arrive from the UK.
We have a twin room, means that each room has a capacity of accommodating 2 persons.
The manager wants them to feel at home. He's tried to think of everything they might need. The signs are in English and Arabic. There's a prayer room, 2 computer centres and a gift shop.
We have some different things like clothes and cigarettes, as you know, they like a cigarette, yes. This is the portable, they will live in a good condition.
The asylum seekers are free to leave any time. This isn't a detention centre, it's their first home in Rwanda, paid for by the UK government in a deal worth £120 million for Rwanda.
It has to start at some point, so this is a beginning.
And do you know more about the cost per refugee in this scheme?
It'll be about the same that the UK spends on accommodating and processing migrants.
This scheme isn't actually saving money.
These are people, so they have to be accommodated in safe, dignified facilities, and that this investment ensures that they get treated with respect.
Rwanda already hosts asylum seekers. The people coming from the UK will not be the first.
Adaga!
40 miles away from the capital, off the beaten track, is this safe haven, a temporary home for people the UN Refugee Agency have brought here from Libya. Refugees who have taken dangerous journeys trying to get to Europe.
The refugees here have similar experiences to the ones coming from the UK, but there's a big difference. Ones here are hoping for resettlement in places like Canada or Sweden. The ones coming from the UK have a one-way ticket. Rwanda is their final destination.
Peter fled war in South Sudan and torture at the hands of people smugglers. The UN have found him a new home in Finland.
It is our last hope that we should be in a free world one day. If I would be prepared to stay in Rwanda, I better go back to Libya.
Did you think about staying in Rwanda?
I never, and I will not do that. And it would be a last mistake to do so.
More than 1,000 people have come through this transit camp in the last 3 years. They have 3 choices: resettling in another country, returning home, or staying in Rwanda. So far, no one has chosen Rwanda. The asylum seekers arriving here will feel the same. Thrust into a new country with no choice. But people here are confident that Rwanda is a place they will call home. A place where they can build a future. Shingi Mararike, Sky News, Kigali.
A bit of breaking economic news for you at the moment. The ONS June labour market stats are out. Let's bring in Sky's Paul Kelsey, who joins us with some analysis on all of this. OK, Paul, what have we been hearing, and good news, bad news for us all?
It's a mixture. Let's start with the good news, shall we, Neil? These are the figures for the labour market in the UK. It's a mixture of numbers for April, numbers for May. The bit people will want to hear is that unemployment is down again, just 3.8%, close to a 50-year low, something we hear ministers hailing all the time. But we have to set that against the fact that still fewer people in employment than there was before the pandemic. And in fact, more than 20% of people are what's classed as economically inactive. That's they're not in work and they're not looking for work. And that helps explain the other side of the coin here, which is that 1.3 million vacancies exist in the economy. That's a record number of jobs, roles that are unfilled at companies, and explains why sector after sector is complaining that they simply cannot fill the jobs they need. We've heard tourism, airlines complain of this, the agriculture industry. Now, the latest this morning, BT say it's slowing down broadband rollout because many of these companies, touching on Brexit, which you've just discussed, can't easily turn to the European Union to fill jobs that are not being filled domestically. And on top of all of that, pay in real terms, because of the high inflation rates we have, has fallen another 2.2%. So you are earning less in real terms, despite the fact you might be working quite hard. This all comes after yesterday's figures of another contraction in the economy in April, 0.3% down GDP. If you can't fill jobs, you can't grow as a company. You can't start to deliver the economic growth the country so badly needs to try and pull away from the current malaise.
Paul, many thanks indeed. Some of the day's other news now, and all bridges to the Ukrainian city of Severodonetsk are now impassable as Russian forces establish control over most of the area. The mayor of the eastern Luhansk region said it's now impossible to evacuate civilians from the city or to get humanitarian aid in. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, will today launch the first in a new series of documents making the case for Scottish independence. The SNP leader has repeatedly said she wants a referendum before the end of next year, despite strong opposition from the UK government. A former spokesman for Donald Trump has said that one of the president's most influential advisors, Rudy Giuliani, was drunk on election night when he advised him to prematurely declare victory. The allegations were made in evidence to the Congressional Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riot. They also heard from the former US Attorney General Bill Barr, who accused President Trump of being detached from reality over allegations of voter fraud.
I was somewhat demoralized because I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with he's become detached from reality. If he really believes this stuff. My opinion then and my opinion now is that the election was not stolen by fraud. And I haven't seen anything since the election that changes my mind on that.
A woman who wrote an online essay called How to Murder Your Husband has been sentenced to life in prison for murdering her husband. 71-year-old Nancy Crampton Brophy was initially convicted of murder last month, but her essay was not allowed to be used as evidence in the trial. Police in Brazil say that search teams looking for a British journalist and his colleague who disappeared in the Amazon more than a week ago are still looking for their bodies. They contradicted reports yesterday that Dom Phillips and his colleague Bruno Pereira had been found dead. The upcoming Buzz Lightyear film will not be shown in 14 countries in the Middle East and Asia. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are among the countries to ban the movie because it features characters in a same-sex relationship sharing a kiss.
It's frustrating. I mean, we've dealt with that with Marvel, and, it feels good to be a part of something that is making social progress, but it's with this ribbon of bittersweet frustration that at the same time there are still places that have not caught up.
The Queen has been photographed for the first time since her Platinum Jubilee celebrations. This was at the Order of the Garter ceremony, where the former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, received his knighthood. Notably missing, however, was Prince Andrew, who stepped down from royal duties in 2019. Now, Beijing is rushing to contain a COVID-19 outbreak traced to a 24-hour bar with millions facing testing and thousands under targeted lockdowns. Someone who knows a thing or two about this, our Asia correspondent Tom Cheshire joins us from the Chinese capital. Quick look on your social media this morning, Tom. I mean, you've been following foul of some of these COVID regulations as well. Tell us what happened to you.
Morning, Neil. Yeah, I mean, it's really Groundhog Day in China with the zero COVID policy. And what's really affecting everyone right now is the uncertainty. So this morning, I went to the gym before work, and as I left the gym, I was told I couldn't leave the gym. They blocked the fire exits. They said we had to stay until afternoon. It took a bit of negotiation, but we got out in the end. Other people had to stay. I'm not entirely sure why I was let out. It was quite a lucky escape. Other people, my colleague Leo, the Asia producer, he was kept in his flat for 24 hours while there was a positive COVID case in his building before eventually being left out. But lots of other people aren't so lucky. They've just been put away in their compounds or they're taken away to quarantine as part of this zero COVID push. It has been going on a while. There's been an outbreak here since April. We're in a lockdown, basically a 5-week lockdown where all restaurants were shut, schools were shut, parks were shut. Everyone was basically told to stay and work at home. Now, they lifted those restrictions just last week. What happened was one person came here to Sanlitun. This is a shopping and nightlife area in Beijing. He had a pretty spectacular 3 days. We visited about 2 dozen restaurants, clubs and bars. Led to a huge super spreading event, more than 200 cases now. All these bars have now been shut down. All the restaurants are takeaway only. People asking, how long will these measures last? Because right now, it doesn't feel like there's any sort of exit plan. The plan really is just to stick with zero COVID.
Tom, many thanks indeed. Now, 5 years on from the Grenfell Tower fire, there will be a service at Westminster Abbey, and survivors, campaigners and bereaved families will take part in a silent walk to remember the 72 people who died. Last night, the tower was lit up in green to mark the date. Charlotte Lomas reports.
72 lives lost, 72 families destroyed. 72 reasons to make sure another tragedy like Grenfell cannot happen again. It's been 5 years since the fire, but for the bereaved and survivors, that time has stood still. The pain in this community is everywhere. It's still written on the walls, on the railings, on the faces of those trying to fight on. Hanan Wahabi survived the fire that night. Her brother, Abdulaziz, and his family did not.
You can see the impact, obviously. They have cleaned it. My brother was wearing this when he died. So I have this in my bedroom.
You keep it next to you?
Yeah, yeah.
Hanan has little left from her flat or her brothers, just memories.
They were a loving family. There was a lot of laughter, a lot of joking. A lot of dry humour in that household, there was.
After the fire, Hanan and her 2 children were left to live in one hotel room for 18 months. She now has somewhere to live, but she doesn't call it home.
Grenfell was my home, and I still see that as my home. I mean, there are times when I might be driving and I forget that Grenfell happened, and it's like you're in a daze and I'm driving towards the tower. And then I'm like, oh my God, where are you going? You don't live there anymore.
As the years have gone on, rather than starting to heal, many people here have told me that their trauma is getting worse, that they feel weaker and more exhausted with a continued fight for answers and for justice. And it's a fight that's left its mark.
Yes, we smile, we may laugh, we may joke. But the only way we do that is to whack on plasters in every single hole that we have. We have wounds. Our wounds are massive. We cover them, but we can only cover them just for a brief period. And then literally when those doors close, you don't see us. We are broken.
We all know how the Grenfell fire started. What's unclear is how this will all end. The ongoing public inquiry has revealed a catalogue of failures, yet not one person has been charged with a crime. And it's this absence of accountability that 5 years on is still at the heart of the trauma here. Charlotte Lomas, Sky News.
Time now for the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go.
To
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Temperatures expected to soar into the 30s in some parts of England this week. We're certainly in for a mostly fine few days, although there will be outbreaks of rain in the northwest and it will be turning warmer. Mostly fine right now, although chilly out of town in the south. Northern Scotland, largely overcast with patchy rain.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, regular viewers will know that I love a bit of looking up at the sky, but stargazers are in for a treat this week. June's picturesque full moon will illuminate the sky. Known as the strawberry moon, it comes ahead of the summer solstice and is the first of 2 consecutive supermoons this year. The strawberry moon named as such to mark the ripening of June-bearing strawberries that could be gathered by North American tribes. I am reliably informed. Another story, truly ain't no satisfaction for Rolling Stones fans in Amsterdam after Mick Jagger tested positive for COVID. Could do with putting a jumper on, couldn't he? I mean, they had to cancel their show in Amsterdam, scheduled for last night. The UK managed to get a look in, though. The band played in Liverpool last week, still going strong. Coming up next, I'll be speaking to Ireland's Minister for European Affairs after the UK moved to override parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. That's next. Welcome back. The European Union has threatened to take legal action over the government's plans to rewrite parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Prime Minister says the changes were legal and necessary to secure the future of the UK, while insisting that any talk of tariffs would be a gross overreaction. Let's speak now to Ireland's Minister for European Affairs, Thomas Byrne, who joins us now. Mr Byrne, great to have you on the programme this morning. I wonder if you can just respond directly then to the justification provided by the Prime Minister yesterday and indeed the Foreign Secretary today. The Good Friday Agreement is at risk if we don't sort out the issues with the protocol, and this is the only way to do it.
Well, we don't accept that at all, because the Good Friday Agreement is an international agreement. Again, there's 2 sides to it. So it's not possible for one side to make a decision unilaterally. It's exactly the same with the protocol. Ireland and the United Kingdom are co-guarantors of that Good Friday Agreement. And if there are problems or where there are issues, and God knows there have been many over the years, both governments work together to resolve them. That's the opposite approach now has been adopted by the British government in relation to the protocol. And I think using the Good Friday Agreement to justify that is another example of unilateralism, which is completely inappropriate in Northern Ireland.
I mean, you've gone quite far in saying that actually what we saw yesterday was an attempt by the government to legitimise breaking the law. Just explain that point.
Well, I absolutely stand by that, because when you have an agreement between countries, the country is expected to comply with the agreement, not to break it. And that is breaking the law, breaking international law. And I think we have to be very, very clear on that. I think the reputational damage for Britain, well, of course, that's a matter for Britain itself, but there's no doubt that it is astonishing many people around the world that Britain would sign a treaty and then decide not to comply with it. And this is particularly the case when there has been a stream of negotiation there, papers produced by the European Commission to try to resolve some of the issues under the protocol. But the idea that you just walk away from your treaty obligations, I think, is really unprecedented. And it's not just that Britain has done this, but I have no doubt that other countries, which may not be as committed to democracy and the rule of law as Britain are now looking at what Britain has done, and maybe they'll reconsider treaty obligations. Why shouldn't they if Britain does this, if Britain breaks the law? And I think that it is a bad move. It's a bad move for Britain, but it's a very bad move for Northern Ireland in particular. The protocol is operating basically the way the British government said it would in all of the documentation it published at the time it signed. So nothing it can say now could be considered to be a surprise or unexpected. It's operating exactly in the way to protect the island of Ireland and to make sure there's no hard border there. That's what we all said that we wanted at that time. That's what Britain said. I think it's incumbent on Britain to work with the European Union to resolve some of those issues. And those issues are only part of the story of the protocol. The other bigger part of the story of the protocol is that the Northern Ireland economy is doing really, really well. Agriculture entirely depends on the protocol. Manufacturing and exporting are benefiting hugely from the protocol. Those parts of retail which certainly have a bigger burden now, that's exactly what the European Union has been looking at to try to resolve and make the burden less for them. That's a burden of Brexit, and that the protocol was there to try to help.
OK, Minister, I don't expect you to fully know the mind of the Prime Minister, but given what you have said, given that all of these issues, these problems as identified by the British government were predicted before they ratified the treaty, why on earth, in your mind, did they sign up to it in the first place?
Well, they were predicted, let's be clear, by the British government in their own documentation as to how it would work. I don't know. I can't read the mind of the Prime Minister, but it does seem to us that there's a certain attempt to appease certain people within the Tory party. In relation to Northern Ireland, I have no doubt that if we come to a good solution, the parties will follow the lead of the governments. We already saw that, where at the start of last year, the DUP themselves were talking about using the protocol to the advantage of Northern Ireland. They weren't overly happy with it, but they were saying, yes, we can work with this, and there is certainly a benefit to that. The benefit is undeniable. And I think if we try to pull back from the protocol, as the British government are trying to do, you will not only destroy that benefit, but you will lead Northern Ireland into greater instability. The Good Friday Agreement requires both governments to work together, and I urge the British government to reconsider this dangerous course of action and to work with the European Union on protocol matters, and to work closely with us in the Irish government on Northern Ireland matters. And the hand of friendship is extended from Dublin.
Sure, but what then is the solution? Indeed, is there a solution? Is there a way that we can square this circle that doesn't involve there being some kind of border down the Irish Sea or a hard border between the Republic and Northern Ireland?
But there's not a hard border between the Republic and...
No, I understand that. I understand there isn't. Of course there isn't. But without... Is there a solution that doesn't involve one of those two options?
Well, the protocol is the solution to the difficulty that people said was faced by the island of Ireland. That is the unique scenario here. There are some checks from Britain to Northern Ireland. There are no checks from Northern Ireland to Britain. And that then allows Northern Ireland to benefit from the best of both worlds. And that's, I thought, what we all wanted. But there is, let me be very clear. Britain will be held to its international obligations. Let there be no doubt about that. This will be worked through. The legal obligation will stay no matter what the House of Commons does, no matter what the government proposes. And I think the better option then for the British government at the moment is to talk to the European Union on the basis of what we propose. And what the European Union has proposed in terms of easing the burden comes directly from having spoken to unionists, having spoken to business, having spoken to farmers. And of course, business, let's be clear, by and large supports the protocol. Of course, they want some of the burdens eased. That's the European Union wants as well. But they support the protocol because they see the benefits of it.
Thomas Byrne, great to have you on the programme this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's bring in our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue. You'll have had a busy morning, much like me. What have you made of what's been going on? I mean, clearly, a couple of things to talk about, but Northern Ireland Protocol, let's start there.
Yeah, and I think it was really interesting to hear what Liz Truss had to say, because, of course, she is the person in government that has been involved in negotiating this. And yesterday, the government invoked something called the doctrine of necessity. That means they basically need to show that there is immediate, serious, grave peril. And I think there are people that are saying, if that is the case, why would they, firstly, not invoke Article 16, which is sort of the emergency cord that you can pull to immediately unilaterally change the Northern Ireland Protocol and to suspend it. But clearly that hasn't happened. And she said that she is addressing serious issues that emerged over the last 2 years. I think the question is, why didn't they expect these issues much earlier on?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point to make. Ali, we will see you next hour and indeed in the 9 o'clock for your take on everything. But for now, thank you. Now, over 1,000 people every day waited over 12 hours in A&E in England in 2021, according to a new report. The Vice President of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, Dr Adrian Broyle, joins us on the programme. Dr Broyle, very good morning to you. Do give us an idea of what the research has found here. I mean, the figures are pretty stark, aren't they? 12-hour waits in accident and emergency. I mean, it's not tolerable in the long term.
No, so we found that far too many people are waiting too long. The reason we've done this report is the way that we measure 12-hour stays in England relies on something called a decision to admit. And this is something that's made a couple of hours, maybe several hours after a patient's been in an emergency department. And the problem is that measure gets gamed. So we've gone back and said, actually, what's the time somebody arrives in a department to what time, and they register as a patient, and how long many of those patients are staying 12 hours? Because actually, we think that's actually what matters to patients. And we found that the figure is 14 times as big as the official figures. I mean, this means people are waiting too long, and that's having really, really long stays in emergency departments. Now, a long stay when you go to an airport because your flight is cancelled is tedious and annoying. When you've got patients who are sick, who are waiting to be admitted into hospital beds, this is a serious safety concern.
So can we generalise at all, Dr. Boyle, about the reasons behind this? Clearly, COVID has placed an awful strain on the health service in general. But when we're talking, 14 times as high as the government figures, 12-hour waits left, right and centre, it suggests to me that it's a broader problem than the pandemic.
Yeah, and you're completely right. These weren't a problem in 2015, and the number has been steadily growing up. But over this year, we seem to have got to a tipping point where the number of 12-hour stays has just, the number of 12-hour stays we've had so far this year is actually greater than the number of 12-hour stays we've had in the last 5 years. The reasons for this, the pandemic has accelerated this a bit, but actually there's a whole bunch of other factors. We don't have enough beds. Within our main hospitals, the beds that we've got are being used by too many people waiting to be discharged either to home because of the difficult interface between acute hospitals and social care. It's a big, complicated problem, but I have been here before. I was qualified in the early 90s, and I remember similar waits where we had enormous long waits in emergency departments and the care really wasn't very good. And it was turned around. It took a lot of political will, commitment and investment, but it is fixable.
Just in terms of the figures and access to this data, how easy was it for you to compile it?
So this data is collected routinely, but not published. And that's an important point. We think that this data should be published and it should be in the public domain and published alongside all the other performance metrics that the NHS publishes.
I think there'll be plenty of people who agree. Dr. Adrian Boyle, great to have you on the programme.
Thank you.
Now, the actor Amber Heard has given her first TV interview since losing her libel case against her ex-husband Johnny Depp. She says she doesn't blame the jury for not believing her.
I don't care what one thinks about me or what judgments you want to make about what happened in the privacy of my own home and my marriage behind closed doors. I don't presume the average person should know those things, and so I don't take it personally. But even somebody who is sure I'm deserving of all this hate and vitriol, even if you think that I'm lying, you still couldn't look me in the eye and tell me that you think on social media there's been a fair representation. You cannot tell me that you think that this has been fair.
There's no polite way to say it. The jury looked at the evidence you presented. They listened to your testimony and they did not believe you. They thought you were lying.
How could, I'll put it this way, how could they make a judgment? How could they not come to that conclusion? They had sat in those seats and heard over 3 weeks of nonstop, relentless testimony from paid employees and towards the end of the trial, randos, as I say.
So you don't blame the jury?
I don't blame them. It wasn't, I don't blame them. I actually understand he's a beloved character and people feel they know him. He's a fantastic actor.
Their job is to not be dazzled by that. Their job is to look at the facts and the evidence. And they did not believe your testimony or your evidence.
Again, how could they, after listening to 3.5 weeks of testimony about how I was a non-credible person, not to believe a word that came out of my mouth?
Now, the price of Bitcoin plummeted 10% to below $25,000 yesterday for the first time since December 2020. The move, it dragged other cryptocurrencies into the red, with their total value falling below $1 trillion for the first time since January last year. Soaring US inflation has prompted some investors to ditch riskier assets like cryptocurrencies. Let's bring in the technology journalist Will Guyatt to explain what on earth is going on in a world that I don't particularly understand very well. Will, always good to see you. Let's start with a definitional issue. Just explain exactly what Bitcoin is, cryptocurrencies are.
Yeah, cryptocurrencies are digital currencies. They're not governed by a bank. Somebody can't step in to control the level of inflation, those kind of things. So they're not regulated in the way we would consider traditional finance and traditional money. And that's by large where I think this whole problem has come from. And I'm sure you're going to get tons of cryptocurrency fans tweeting you and telling you that I've misinterpreted this completely. But this feels very much like the gold rush. It feels like we've all rushed into a town. Some of us have started making some money from it. A couple of us have opened banks. It would be like me opening the Bank of Will Guyatt. And what's happened here is some of these organizations that have gone into trading cryptocurrencies, now there's been this massive correction, have also had problems. We've had an organization called Celsius, which offered cryptocurrency loans to people. They've currently put us suspended on all of their trading. And as a result of that, the whole cryptocurrency market yesterday lost about another 10 to 15%. It's sort of crazy times in this world where it's like being on a roller coaster. I know the markets are all volatile, but you really have to hold your nerve if you've got something like cryptocurrency, because it can these cryptocurrencies, they can fluctuate by 20 to 30% in a day on a bad day.
But you mentioned Celsius there, and Celsius and others operate as if they are banks, but they aren't regulated in the same way that banks are, which is why, you went on social media yesterday after the Celsius announcement, there were thousands of people complaining that they had millions, tens of millions of pounds tied up in crypto that they couldn't get their hands on.
Yeah, now this is the problem. It goes back to the Bank of Will Guyatt principle. It's all right when the times are good, but if you're not regulated by the Financial Standards Authority or the US equivalent or any kind of global equivalent, you can then shut doors and do what you fancy. There was a period yesterday where Binance, which is the world's biggest cryptocurrency exchange, had to temporarily suspend trading of their cryptocurrency because of a technical issue. And that was something that was quickly resolved. But you find in these situations that without the Financial Standards Authority and others involved, there is this danger and volatility. And really big fans of cryptocurrency say that these organizations shouldn't be part of it. But if you're an everyday investor, if you're somebody at home who genuinely believes the ads that you can see online, which says you can get 18% return or something like that, right now, that's very appealing to people. And because this isn't regulated, it's those people that are piling in with money they really don't have that are the ones who are being most impacted by this whole volatility in cryptocurrency. Everybody thought it was going that way. We're obviously seeing a massive correction right now.
I mean, Bitcoin, if you invested in Bitcoin in the early days, you'd be sitting pretty right now. But it is true to say, isn't it, that there are quite a few bad faith actors operating in the kind of cryptocurrency world. There were, any number of people coming out with their own cryptocurrency, which, what a surprise, collapses 6 months later.
Yeah, it's true. And I was fortunate in that I ended up buying nearly 2 Bitcoin in 2012 when I was trying to do something for a radio interview. I didn't understand it at all at the time, and I purchased them. I still have them sat somewhere, but I'm not relying on it. It's just sat there as a glorious experiment for me, and possibly the only time in my life that taking a financial punt has ever worked. But for some people who literally would pump their savings in, let's say it's a young person who's trying to get a deposit for a house, they put this sort of percentage of money in because they think it's going to grow over 6 months or a year. They've lost it, and that's the situation. That's the crazy situation at the moment. We've got.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to let you get back to the tech shed because I've got 15 seconds left on the programme. Love that place. I'll see you there one day soon. That's a lot for the 7 o'clock hour. Stay right where you are.